good to go.
Hello everyone, just a few housekeeping details. Can you please make sure you have your microphone on mute while the speakers are presenting? You can write your comments and questions in the chat and we will get through them at the end of the session. We'll also be recording the session and the slides will be available afterwards on YouTube. So yes, we'll get started now. So today we'll have with us Diana Edgecombe from the Special Projects team from Children's Services, and Diana will be presenting what the Council is doing. We'll have a welcome from Councillor Larry Culhane, the Cabinet Member for Children and Education. We'll have Gemma Potter, class teacher from Miles Coverdale and Climate Change Coordinator, talking about what Miles Coverdale is doing on climate change education. And finally, Moya O'Hara, Director of UrbanWise.London, will also be talking about the voluntary sector and what they are doing on climate education. So I'll just go through the agenda very quickly. We'll have the welcome, what the Council is doing, what the community is doing, and the Q&A session at the end. So I'll now like to introduce you to Councillor Larry Culhane, which will give us a welcome and a brief introduction about the Council and about climate education. Larry.
Thanks very much, Michelle, and good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining this bonus event. Hammersmith and Fulham, we've extended Climate Action Week and made it 2 weeks, which is great. Yeah, so I'm Larry Culhane, born and raised in the borough, and now I'm the very proud Cabinet Member for Children and Education for Hammersmith and Fulham Council. And forgive me if you know this already, in Hammersmith and Fulham in 2019, we declared a climate emergency and pledged to become carbon neutral as a council by 2030. And there's a couple of things that we've already got in train to do that. We set up a climate and ecological emergency commission made up of local residents and experts to make recommendations to us as a council as to what we can do to help tackle the climate emergency as soon as possible. And we've also set up a cross-cutting climate emergency department, which is not in a silo. It has its finger in every single department within the council to advise those departments on the measures that they can take and support them to take those measures in order to tackle the climate emergency. And obviously we're doing this for good reason. We have a beautiful planet, a beautiful borough, but we only have one of them, and there's no second chance with our planet. We can't order another one off Amazon. We can't, get a handyman round to come and fix it. We have one chance to get this right before irreversible damage is caused to our planet that we're going to hand over to the young people of this borough. And that's an important point because this session today is talking about how we're making them or placing children in the borough at the very heart of everything we're doing on the climate emergency. And there's two reasons we're doing that. One, because this generation of young people is probably going to be the first that inherits a worse society and a worse planet than we did. We've often benefited from the actions of our predecessors and elder generations. And actually, this is the first generation that's probably going to get a worse deal than those that came before them. So it's the right thing to put them at the heart of the change that we need to make to save our planet. But also, it's not just the right thing to do, it's a very smart thing to do. You will struggle to find a more passionate, committed, inventive group of people than the young people in this borough. And I fondly remember doing a digital surgery with children at Lady Margaret back in 2018, I think it was, and before we declared a climate emergency and before the issue came to the forefront of everyone's minds. And actually, amongst other things, it was a politics engagement program we were doing, but actually they asked a question as to whether I'd be happy with them bunking school on the Friday. We had that meeting and I sort of said, oh, well, why is that? It's not something you really should do. And they sort of said, oh, there's this girl in Sweden who's talking about the climate and saying that we should sort of protest and we should not go to school on Friday until politicians begin to take action on the climate emergency. Obviously that young woman turned out to be Greta Thunberg, and I think that just shows an example of actually how savvy our young people are and how committed and passionate they are to the world that they live in. And this event is to showcase some of the work that we're doing with them but also to talk about how you can get involved, whether you work for the council or you're a local resident, a local business, or whether you're a school that's interested in taking part. There's plenty of different ways that you can get involved. And of course, with anything, we couldn't even dare as a council to think that we can tackle this on our own. We've only been able to do what we have done so far. We'll only be able to do what we will in the future, thanks to a whole range of partners throughout the borough. You will see examples of the work that we've done with the BBC, Royal College of Art, Lyric Theatre. You'll be hearing from Urban Wise London, the Hammersmith Community Gardens Association, Educate Global, just to name a few of the partners, and there's many more. But I'd particularly like to say thanks and pay tribute to the schools who have taken part so far in this and have been the pioneers on our work with climate change with young people in the borough. I think it's often forgotten how much pressure schools across the country are under in normal times, let alone in the times we live in now. They live in a world where they have Ofsteds every couple of years. They have league tables that they need to perform well in with their results every year. And over the past decade, they've seen their budget shrink through the funding allocations they've been given by the government. But despite all of those pressures, they've been at the forefront of all of the change that is needed and the issues that face young people, not just in the borough, but across the country. They've been a huge help to us in terms of tackling food poverty, which is why we fund free school meal vouchers in the holidays. It's why we offer free breakfasts to all our primary schools throughout the borough. And we're piloting a universal free school meal lunch scheme in 2 of our secondaries. They've also been at the forefront of tackling digital poverty throughout the pandemic and making sure that young people who have made so many sacrifices to protect us don't miss out on their precious education. And of course, despite all of those pressures that they're under, they're at the forefront of engaging young people in tackling the climate emergency. So I'd like to pay a particular tribute to our schools in the borough. But enough from me. It's time now to hear about all of the stuff we have done and how you can get involved. So I would like to hand you over, if I may, to Diana Edgecombe, who's our Special Projects Manager in Children and Education in Hammersmith and Fulham. Over to you, Diana.
Thanks, Larry. Really good to hear all the lovely things that you're saying about, all the work that we've been doing and also what the council have been doing. And I think the fact that you talk about the climate and ecological emergency is very important, especially with the work we're doing with schools, young people and children, and biodiversity as well. So thank you. Okay, my name's Diana Edgecombe. Welcome everybody. It's great to have you here. I'm the Special Projects Manager within the education team within Children's Services, and I work alongside my colleague Michelle Ribello, and we have another colleague that joined us recently called Lucy Bird, who's a graduate management trainee, and we've been working very hard on working with our schools in developing projects and programs that support the whole climate education agenda over the last 2 years, really, I would say, probably longer, but it obviously with the pandemic, it seems like it is longer. So yes, that's who I am. So Michelle, thank you. So we've been involved in a number of projects, which we'll talk about very briefly. So the Mudlarks Primary Project, we've worked with, some of you may have heard of that, and Larry was involved in that as well, back in 2019. Which is a great primary ecological project that we did with urbanwise.london. We set up a climate education group with our primary schools at the moment, which is great. We've been meeting virtually every term, and hopefully at some point we will meet in the flesh. And we are going to be developing a secondary climate education group as well. And then we've been involved with UrbanWise in the Summer in the City programme. We had a big event last year, which you'll hear more about later. And we've got more coming up this year. And I think some of you would be really interested in that if you're residents or staff, or, you've got young people and children who would like to come along to some of these events. Next slide, please, Michelle. So just to give some context, Mudlarks 1, we started that in 2018. We engaged 9 primary schools. As I said, the focus was on environmental recovery and observing nature. we've been so fortunate in this borough to work with people like Urban Wise, and you'll be hearing from Moya later, BBC Studios, the Royal College of Art, the Lyric Theatre, lots of other small to medium size employers as well. We had some great outcomes from this project over the 2 years we've been running it. A music video, campaigning song, banners, bird feeders, and lots of eco family activities as well. So it's been a really lovely feel-good project. Next slide, please, Michelle.
We'll just be showing the video, Diana, or just...
Oh, you're showing the... Oh, yes, yes. Great. We want you to see this. Before we show it, Michelle, can I just give people some context? Because this was actually, we actually got to make this during the height of the pandemic last summer. And we worked with our brilliant BBC filmmaker, and we worked virtually with the schools, and he was able to, you know, collect all this film, and the children wrote this song in 2019, Miles Coverdale, I think it was, and all the children have embraced it. So go ahead, Michelle. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. Great. Well, I hope you all enjoyed that. I mean, I expect a lot of you have seen it before, but we're very proud of it because it was just seeing the children enjoying themselves at such a difficult time. And it was amazing that we managed to get it done, to be quite honest. So it's our 3 R's song. Oh, good. Nice to see the comments. So just to give you some more good news, and with the Summer in the City programme this year that our colleagues Let Me Play are organising, we've been involved in helping with that. And we're so lucky that we've got a number of large organisations again who are going to be running some events. And this will be focused on climate education and ecology. So through my colleague Michelle Rebello, we managed to get a partnership with the English Chamber Orchestra, who are apparently the most touring orchestra in the world, but obviously that's not been happening recently. And they are going to be running a series of small workshops in Ravenscourt Park. It starts, the programme starts on the 23rd of July when there's going to be a lunch in the park. But after that, it's going to be every week. English Chamber Orchestra will be there every Wednesday. It's not the whole orchestra, I hasten to add. it's a small quartet or trio who are going to be focusing on climate activities and music that suits that type of thing. So they've got lots of ideas about what they're doing. So we'll have a programme that we can send out to people. Urban Wise London and Hammersmith Community Gardens are going to be doing a lot of work with young people and children and families in Ravenscourt Park and other venues throughout the borough. My colleague Lucy Bird has been, as an alumni of Royal College of Art, and they are already a partner with us, she's already secured them to do some activities, climate-related activities within Ravenscourt Park. So we're really excited about this, and I know the English Chamber Orchestra particularly will be continuing to work with us next term and into Easter term as well, because they're very keen to get involved with what we're doing in the borough around climate education. Okay, next slide, please. We've also, back in 2019, I think it was, I mean, it's difficult to know which year it is these days, Jan Parnell, our Director of Education, was very interested in Educate Global and their work with the UN on developing accreditation for teachers around climate education. And we now have a number of schools who are involved in that programme. 2 schools have successfully completed the programme. We've got one of them here today, actually, Miles Coverdale. And we've got a further 6 primary schools who'll be working on their accreditation as well. And we were actually fortunate enough in 2019 to be involved virtually with the COP conference in Madrid. And we had a number of children, I think again it was from Miles Coverdale, ourselves and Urban Wise and Sally Brooks from Fulham Cross Academy School Trust come to that as well. So we've got some nice photos of that too. So this is quite exciting for us. Next slide, please. So just to give you an idea, I mentioned the climate education group. Yes, we're sharing good practice. We're hoping to develop further projects. We are going to be expanding the Mudlarks project as well. We've developed a climate education guide, which is available to anybody that wants to see it, and that will be updated. It's got lots of useful links. It's got curriculum input from our colleagues. And again, as I said, we will also be looking at the secondary climate education group as well. Next slide, please. So next steps, well, obviously building our relationships with our key partners, more projects, expanding the climate education group, mapping and research. We're looking at further comms. We're also going to be looking at other venues where we can, you know, perhaps host climate education activities and host children, one of which is the Pier. More news on that to follow over the next few months, I'd imagine. More curriculum sessions will be delivered in schools by Urban Wise via the Mudlarks. We will be hopefully linking up more with youth leaders, working with secondary schools, and we are working very closely with Emily and her team on looking at how we can input into COP15 and COP26 and high profile events. In fact, my colleague Carlos from Urban Wise and I did a small presentation at the British Ecological Society just 2 weeks ago. And also we'll be exploring new funding opportunities as well so that we can develop this even further. Next slide, please.
I think that's it from you, Diana.
Oh, okay, that's it from me, Michelle. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll look at all your questions and comments as well and respond to those. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Diana. I'd now like to introduce Gemma Potter, teacher from Miles Coverdale Primary School.
Hi, everybody. So yeah, as I said, or as we've been so lovely introduced, I'm a teacher at Miles Coverdale Primary School, Year 5 and 6 teacher and climate change coordinator. Our school is a one-form entry in the heart of Shepherd's Bush, about 250 children, and we have a speech and language resource base. So our kind of focus on the climate education for us came from the Greta Thunberg situation as well. Our children they didn't take the day off school. We actually supported them with making their own posters, and we went on our own climate march up to Ravenscourt Park. And I think that kind of pushed the children to have this real enthusiasm for climate. And that then led us on as a staff to look at what we're doing. So as you can see, we've started the climate accreditation with Educate Global. We have completed the bronze award and we're working on the silver at the same time. That requires our teachers to undertake a number of courses from the UN, and then we take part in other projects. We've got 60% of our teachers have completed all 5 courses, so they're fully accredited climate education teachers. And then we've even got our support staff, they've started to undertake the courses as well. So as a school, we're hoping that everybody will be able to undertake as many of these courses as possible. Next slide, please. So Eco Team was a big push for us this year, and UrbanWise helped us get this off the ground and running. So they meet once a week. The interest in this was overwhelming from the children, so we had to just kind of pick a small group. But they do so much work across the school and help to get the other children involved as well. So even if they're not part of the actual team, they're part of the solution as a whole. So they do a number of activities across the school, boosting awareness. They've completed the Bronze Schools Award this year and they're working on the silver. They have participated in the climate change champions debate the other day with other schools from the borough. And they work with school council and with other staff during focus weeks to help add to the climate change element of those focus weeks. Next slide, please. So a big focus for us as staff is the curriculum mapping that we do. We have a lot of focus weeks to really show the connections between different subjects, but that's something we've been looking at more this year and trying to incorporate climate education within that, so it is just part and parcel of everything that we do. Just an example we have here is for our DT project that we did in year 5, where we look at textiles and making clothes. Normally we'd take the children to the market, they choose their fabric and make their own clothes. This year we decided to get them to find a piece of clothing from home that either was too small or had a rip or a stain, and look at how they could redesign that and upcycle that into something that could be reused to stop us wasting. So they learned how to fix clothes, but also how to make things more interesting. You've got children made t-shirts into bags and so on. So that was a really great project for them. And then they got to catwalk it to their own music, and it was fantastic. And that's something we're spreading out across our curriculum, not just in this area. Next slide, please. So we've tried to push our climate curriculum with projects. We would normally do a focus week. For November in the autumn term, we decided to do a whole month, just to show that this is an ongoing thing. It's not just a quick focus and then it's done. This is a long lasting thing that we're looking at as a school. So we looked at our waste, mainly food waste. We did an audit at the start of the week. We collected our lunch waste. We're quite pleased to see we don't waste that much, but we then sorted out what we had wasted into different categories. So things that could be composted, things that couldn't, should have been in recycling, and then food that wasn't fully eaten. So the children then really worked hard to make sure they were eating all the food on their plate, so they really reduced their waste. There were a number of challenges across this week for the children, looking at using reusable water bottles instead of single use and so on. And one of them was a great project that we did with a lady called Anna Pitt, who has written a book about reducing waste, where the children really researched and looked into how they could give tips to other children and families about what they can do to reduce their waste. How they might use orange peel, for example, and make it into marmalade, or crushed fruit and make it into a smoothie. So they really got creative with that, and we're presenting the fully made printed book to them next week. So that's a really exciting thing, and very proud of them for that. Next slide, please. Another one of our focus weeks was innovations for the future. we linked lots of subjects together, mainly the STEM subjects, so science, technology, engineering, maths, climate. We mixed art in there as well, and just really got them to think about innovative ways to reuse things and to do activities that we would normally do, but in a more environmentally friendly way. So they had tasks like designing a method of transport for our school mascot, Miles the Mouse, how he might get to school. And then to add on to that, could they design that from recycled products? You can see there's a child there in reception fixing books so that they can be reused instead of being wasted or thrown away. And another child's made a game from recycled products. So really just getting them to think outside the box of something that would usually be wasted or thrown away. How can they make that into something exciting? Next slide, please. Plastic Free July, we've launched this week. We are really trying to reduce the amount of plastic that we use and kind of just really get our heads around the amount of plastic that we do use. Again, it starts with a review of our usage. We've really tried to get our families involved as well. So they've been participating in family surveys. We've got staff surveys and class surveys to get an idea of what we're using, and asking all of those groups of people to make pledges of how they intend to, as a family or as a household, work towards improving what they're doing at home. So reducing the amount of plastic that they use and waste, and go for more environmentally friendly options. We have collected plastic bottles that children might have been using single use, and you can see in the picture there, we're preparing them to make a greenhouse. So they're not getting wasted either. It's another example of how, if you've used something, we can still build it into something that makes a great difference. We're looking at doing a swap shop. So children have come up with ideas of making your own toothpaste or things like that, where children and families could say, we're going to swap using toothpaste in wasteful tubes, and we're going to go for homemade options, and ideas like that. So the children have come up with so many great things. And we've only just started the project, so over the next couple of weeks I'm sure they will come up with more. Next slide, please. Planting and growing is something that we're quite excited about. This kind of came as a push on from our waste review and looking at how we could reuse things. So the waste from spring onions, for example, we've started to regrow them. You can just, once you get the roots going again, plant them in soil and regrow your own onions to keep using them. Avocado seeds, you can see a picture there of some lovely pepper plants that are growing just from the seeds that were left over. So the children have actually seen that whole process of, instead of throwing it away, planting it, and then the new product growing from that. And once these, come into full blossom, we will have our own peppers. So that's another really exciting thing. Next slide, please. So that kind of all leads on to where we're going in the future. We want to continue the amazing things that we're doing, but add to that. So as I mentioned, the Silver Awards for Educate Global and for Eco Schools, we're working on those still, and embedding the climate curriculum in everything that we do. The growing areas is something we really want to focus on as well. Sourcing reclaimed wood, for example, to make our own planters, and then get those peppers planted in so that the children can see the fruits of their labour, literally. And then on top of that, we'd like to build an idea of a child accreditation, so they can work towards following certain courses or doing certain projects and participating in activities in order to get their own kind of accreditation for themselves. So we've got a whole school of climate champions, hopefully, by the end of it. So lots of great things going on, and I'm very, very proud of our children and our staff. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Gemma. It was great to see your presentation, as long as with great pictures. I would like now to introduce you to our colleague Moya O'Hara from urbanwise.london.
Thank you, Michelle. Thanks very much. Hello, everybody. It was really great to hear all that fantastic work that Miles Coverdale has been doing over the past few years. Urbanwise London has been is a charity that's been working in the borough for about 35 years. So during that time, we've probably worked with thousands and thousands of children and young people throughout the borough. Many of them will be adults by now, of course, and have children of their own. And during that whole time, we've engaged children in some hands-on activities, often to do with the environment and actually helping the environment. So we've got our aims up there. It's all about active outdoor learning with a local flavour. So we relate everything to the local area, and children and young people really respond well to that. We also like to help young people to actually communicate their views on environmental issues and the things that concern them. And really, we do need to be looking to young people for some of the answers to the situation that we're in terms of climate change. And we like to get young people together with teachers and with the local community and with experts in their field, so they can discuss the issues and put forward ideas for change. So that's really what we're all about. Next slide, please. Thank you. So looking at how we work with schools, I've just got a few pictures there to show a couple of the projects that we work on. But every year we probably have more than we probably have about, I don't know, 10 or a dozen or something projects going, all on different things. Diana's already told you about the Mudlarks project, which was mainly concerned with river and canal pollution, particularly of plastics. So it was really awareness raising and trying to get children to think of ways that they could help that situation rather than contribute to it by lots of plastic use. And we had things like we ran some plogs in the park with a company called Plogolution, who get people out and about. And plogging is litter picking while keeping fit. So the children were all sort of dressed up with gloves and litter pickers and things. And we'd collect the litter in the park and we'd sort it out. And that way they could really see how much of the litter, often which ends up in our waterways, actually doesn't need to be used at all if we just take our own water bottle with us wherever we go. So by actually doing something, it's really the best way of learning important points. So that was the Mudlarks. Our project about Bazalgette is ongoing at the moment. He was a Victorian engineer who actually made our sewer system, and he, it was an incredible thing to do. He's probably saved many more lives than many other people who are more hailed than he was, because there was cholera at the time. When the sewer system went in, people didn't die of cholera after that. So, amazing thing. And now we're having a new sewer system put in, which will help to protect the River Thames. And that's what Tideway is doing all the way up and down the river. So 2 major projects for us. The middle photo shows some CPD work that we do with teachers and, just helping them to be more confident in using the outdoors for learning. So looking at biodiversity and nature and doing some history and geography as well outdoors. So we do those regularly with school teams. And we also have other projects. We can help schools run eco clubs, for example, and we have a STEAM project, so science, technology, engineering, art and maths. And that has a very strong environmental aspect to it as well. And that's, we're working with about half a dozen schools a year on that project. And schools can also visit us, or we can visit them and take them out and about in their local area for local studies sessions, and they're hands-on discovery sessions, just learning about their local environment, often focusing on geography and science, sometimes on a bit of history as well. And those children you see on the right-hand side are having a look at Wandsworth Bridge in the distance there. Next slide, please, Michelle. In addition to lots of school work that we do in and out of schools all the time, we also do some less curriculum-focused work with the local community. And it might involve a school, or it might just be with a group of, it might just be with families or a group of adults. So, for example, on the right-hand side, you can see a guide to Wormwood Scrubs that we made some time ago with children from Old Oak Primary, and they helped us make it. So they go out, they do some discovery themselves, out and about in the local area, they come back into school, and their findings go to make a trail that can be used with their parents and siblings. So we might get some poetry or some nature points with trail locations, all sorts of different things that we can do, and artwork as well. And the middle photograph shows a World Car Free Day, which is normally around the 21st, 22nd of September. And we were able to get some road closures put in and discourage parents and staff as well from schools from driving to school, instead taking other means of transport. We did lots of different activities like cycle training and recycled art and road safety, involving other members of the community with us, with the school all day. And then after school, we had sort of a bit of a party, really. And you can see some of our police helping out and doing some lovely dancing in the street. We were dancing in the street. It was a lovely day. And on the right-hand side there, you can see a dramatic picture of Hammersmith Bridge that was taken by some young people from St Andrew's Youth Club who work with us on a whole project about the riverside and so on, because we like to work with youth groups as well. And we also do guided walks for adults and families. So, you know, it's always worth looking out for those. Next slide, please, Michelle. So really, lots going on with us. We're looking forward to running our the Summer in the City, the bit of it that we're doing in partnership with Hammersmith Community Garden, but there are lots of other groups who are involved in running activities for young people right through the summer. And a lot of that will be outdoors, which is brilliant because it's a nice, safe place to be. And it's also engaging people with their parks, which is so important for them, especially when they've been cooped up a bit this year in their bedrooms and so on. Most of what we do, we really like it to fit into the whole climate change agenda and the council's remit to reduce carbon emissions. And that's what we will continue to aim to do in our work with schools and the community in the future. So there we are. There's our details. Do get in touch if you want to know any more about it. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Moya. And again, great pictures and great to see all the lovely work that you're doing in the community. I'd now like to thank all our speakers for, joining us today and telling us a bit more of their areas of work. We're now going to move on to our Q&A session. My colleague Lucy will be kind of moderating the questions that are coming through the chat. But I'm just going to leave the slide if you have a specific question to one of our speakers, so you know their names or exactly what area they're working on. So I don't know if any questions have come through yet, Lucy, and if you'd like to just facilitate that bit.
Fantastic. So as Michelle says, please feel free to put questions in the chat, or also there's a raise hand function. So if you just want to raise your hand and ask out loud, that would be fantastic as well. So there's a question for Gemma to start us off, which is, what have some of the challenges been bringing climate education into your school, and how have you overcome them?
I think engagement would have been a challenge to begin with. I think getting everybody involved, it's great, the kids are all excited, but trying to now bring in families and things like that. So for this project that we've done now, to get the families more involved, I said to the children in the assembly, the class that gets the most responses from families gets extra play. So incentivizing the children to go and get their parents involved a bit more too. I think that's definitely been helpful. Funding is always difficult, but because we're looking at reusing things and just talking to, other connections, that's definitely helpful. But I think funding will be an ongoing thing for any school. But we're very lucky that we've been given time to kind of look at our curriculum, and a lot of things that we're doing as part of the climate change agenda are things that we've already kind of started to incorporate anyway. Yeah, so off the top of my head, that's what I can think of in terms of challenges.
Fantastic, thank you. Thinking about children educating their families and the role reversal between, actually it's not just adults educating children, it's the other way around, and hopefully the kind of partnership working we're all doing together will help with funding and creating more opportunities. So thank you. There's another question, I think this one will probably go to Diana, which is, how is Hammersmith and Fulham doing with school streets in the borough?
Okay, thank you everyone. Thank you for that question. Interestingly enough, we did have, I'm not sure if Ian is in this call, but Ian Hawthorne came to our last climate education group meeting and was discussing how he could support schools around this area. So the schools were going to contact him directly because he was able to sort of tell them how he might be able to help them in making the school streets safer, environmentally, reducing traffic, etc., etc. So that's my answer to your question. So we've really left it to Ian Hawthorne to roll with that. So I don't know if anyone else has got any other suggestions around that. That's what was useful for us anyway at the Climate Education Group. Does that answer your question?
Hopefully it does, and you can pop follow-up questions into the chat as well. So thank you, Diana. So there's another question for you, Gemma, which is, how can we get more schools on board via sharing what you've done with others? So I'm guessing that's thinking about linking up school networks a bit more. Do you have any reflections on that?
So we've started that in terms of the climate group that we have with the schools that are undertaking the accreditation. So we've kind of got bits of that going. I think once we kind of come out the other side of the whole COVID situation, I think we'll be able to team up a lot more successfully, because at the moment it's mainly virtually, and with having remote education and things, it's been quite difficult. But I think that's something that we will continue to do, is maybe link up with those schools to start with, and I think the idea is to kind of make more and more connections. I think the Mudlarks project that we took part in was a great way to connect with other schools and support each other with the climate change agenda, and I'm sure we'll get all of that kind of social aspect up and running again once we're through the other side.
Great, thank you. It's a really good point, how it's a lot easier to connect if it's through a project or an accreditation, and then you have those shared goals straight away, and then hopefully other schools say, oh, this looks amazing and we want to join in as well. So thank you. So the next question I'm going to direct to Moya, if that's okay, which is, how do you engage hard to reach children who may not be interested or encouraged by their parents to participate?
Okay, well, if the children are attending school, which they should be, then they will be a part of what the curriculum is offering. So if the curriculum is rich in those activities, they will be taking part in it and they will get that understanding. In terms of out of school activities, the Summer in the City programme that's being rolled out actually has some lunch involved. So it's really targeted at families who could do with having a little bit of extra help in buying food and that kind of thing, people in food poverty. And I think that providers who are getting involved in that summer programme will be approaching schools to ask them which families to target their play schemes at, so that we're reaching children who really need it and could do with those activities and also the lunch. So that's what I do anyway.
Fantastic, it's great to link those together. Thank you, Moya. I'm just keeping my eye on the chat, and I think there's 2 questions that we can maybe link together for Councillor Culhane. So Emily was asking, what have we done to work with schools that aren't maintained by the local authority? And I think Peter's question kind of could link on, asking about what steps we've taken to roll the initiatives out to different people across the borough, and also to talk a little bit more about goals for outreach for 2022 and later on in the decade, and also what incentives and pressures have you applied for secondary schools. So there's lots of questions within that, but maybe you could talk a little bit more about further outreach and future plans.
Thanks, Lucy, and thanks, Peter, and everyone for your questions so far. It's a very interesting question from Emily in terms of maintained schools in Hammersmith and Fulham. It's a very fragmented education system in that there are maintained primary schools, there are a lot of faith schools, a lot of academies, a lot of free schools, a lot of independent schools. And our position, since we became a sovereign borough service again in children and education in 2018, we were previously for 8 years, or 4 years, sorry, in a, no, it was 8 years, I beg your pardon, in a tri-borough arrangement where officers were shared across KNC and Westminster. We came out of that in 2018. And since then, actually, we've tried to re-establish a different relationship with schools in the borough. Historically, local government has very much had a sort of an adult-child relationship with education, where local authorities would sort of come down with diktats and sort of say, here's what you need to do and everything else, which personally I think is completely ridiculous. I think you only need to go and visit a school to see how committed and passionate they are about our young people. And actually, we've tried to establish a relationship which is the other way around, so that they don't work for us, we work for them, we work for the schools. And that has lent itself to actually a much more cohesive school estate across the borough, because there aren't that many maintained schools that in theory we are responsible for. There's a lot of schools that have a direct relationship with the government that cuts us out. But having that relationship has brought everyone closer together. I think that the wider point in terms of rolling out these initiatives across the borough and in some of those schools that aren't maintained, I think like anything in life, you need a couple of pioneers to start and test it out and see how it goes, what the challenges are. I refer back to the point I made at the very start that schools are under enormous pressure just on the day-to-day basics, the bread and butter of what they're there to do in terms of results and Ofsteds, all amongst an envelope of a shrinking financial envelope handed down to them by the government. So not every school will be in a position right now to do this, because they'll have other core functions that they'll need to focus on. But having schools like Miles Coverdale, which is maintained, and Fulham College, Fulham Cross Academy, which isn't local authority maintained, it's an academy, it's independent of us. But having them being the pioneers in this actually allows those other schools that are interested but maybe not in a position straight away to do it, to learn from their experiences, and sort of that peer-to-peer relationship is really important in terms of rolling it out. So in summary, what I'm saying is gone are the days where we just, send out a memo and tell people what to do. Actually, it's much more of a from the grassroots up. We've got a couple of schools who have pioneered this. There's a few more schools that are working with the Mardlarks programme that Diana presented, and it will build from there. There are some schools that are doing their own thing as well. I know Good Shepherd are doing some really good stuff on climate education, but the most important thing is schools sharing those experiences with each other, and how you can do this sort of stuff amongst all of the statutory functions that they have to perform, how they can fit it into Ofsted, how they can fit it in without jeopardising some of the other things that we as a society expect of them, and doing it in the middle of a pandemic where practically every school in the borough has had to run 2 schools. They've stayed open for key workers and vulnerable children when there's been lockdowns, and schools have not allowed every child in, whilst also running virtual schools as well. So it's not an immediate rollout, it comes with time, but we're getting there, and really proud of the work that Miles Coverdale and Fulham Cross Academy have done in terms of pioneering that, and I'd like to thank them for it.
Fantastic, thank you very much. So I'm just scrolling through the chat, and there's a few other questions that maybe Councillor Culhane can answer, or other people who work in the council, which are about our links with the Mums for Lungs. So I'm guessing that's some kind of campaign. I haven't heard of it before, but sounds really interesting. I definitely need to look into that myself, and about links that we have with transport and reducing cars, and then a broader question about local government powers and how we can use them to encourage schools spending time on green.
You've gone on mute, Lucy, but I think, yeah, I've seen the question. In terms of, apologise, I'd meant to touch upon the sort of incentives and powers, if you like. Firstly, Mums for Lungs, I hadn't heard of them, but would love to. So if someone could send through details of that, would very much like to read more about that. In terms of pressures and incentives, in terms of pressures, in short, there aren't, for some of the reasons I explained before. Most of the schools in the borough are not maintained. And also, I just don't think that's the right way to go about it. With various other things, there's climate education stuff we're doing, and other measures that we've taken in terms of, providing free school meals, free breakfast for all primary schools. It's much better if the schools, we support the schools into doing it themselves. We're there to support them, even if we don't have any powers to use to, I can't rock up to Gemma's classroom and dictate that she does climate change, because the only ones really with powers are Ofsted, and they can dictate certain things, but we don't have those sort of powers. But the much better way, I think, of doing it is organically and supporting the schools to lead that change, and then having the schools support each other in terms of bringing other schools on board. And I think the evidence that we've seen today shows that that's the right way to go about it. So we're getting there. But yeah, there's no powers. We can't, go around beating schools with sticks. Not that we would want to. But I think this is the long term. This is a much more sustainable way of doing it. Having the schools lead from the front. In terms of incentives, we're working. One benefit of this cross-cutting climate emergency department is that we're picking up pace now in terms of working with schools on school streets. So I think it was indeed last week, myself and the cabinet member for the environment got in touch with a load of head teachers to progress them to the next stage in terms of looking at their schools. And there's other things we're doing, our capital programme over the next few years, we'll be looking at how we can use that to help in terms of moving schools along with sort of decarbonising and everything else. So there's a few things. I wish we had more powers to do stuff, but I think actually it's about working together to change this. And I think there's lots of evidence, even if the school hasn't been mentioned here. I honestly couldn't name a school in the borough that isn't interested in this. And it's about supporting them in their current circumstances to do what they can on this.
Lucy and Michelle, I'm conscious we've only got a couple of minutes left. I wonder if, I appreciate there's many more questions in the chat. So as with all of the other events, we are collecting those together. We are getting colleagues to contribute, and we will follow up with answers to all of your questions. So apologies that we haven't been able to get to all of those today. So Michelle, are you happy to move on to the next slide? And I think we'll wrap up in the next couple of minutes.
Sure, will do. Thank you, Emily. So this is just a slide to kind of wrap up the ways that you can get involved or find more information about. So the education team, most of our resources that are outwards facing are on the Lilla Hassett website under the Curriculum Hub, and you'll find out a bit more of the climate education, some of the minutes from the last climate education group meetings. They can also be accessed there, and you can have a look at what sort of topics and discussions we've had with schools. The Summer in the City program, this is a long-standing webpage on our website. If you just Google Summer in the City, it will take you directly to the main webpage, and the program will be advertised over there as well. Just to reiterate, the launch event is on the 23rd of July at 4 p.m. And then to follow up with UrbanWise and what they're doing in up to, please just follow their website, www.urbanwise.london, and you'll be able to find all the projects and exciting events that they are constantly putting together with the community. I'm just going to hand over to Emily to just give you a bit more details about the climate team and what they are leading up.
Thank you, Michelle. So finally, just to wrap up, we have launched a community map about lots of brilliant things that are happening across the borough that are tackling the climate and ecological emergency. And this is one of the recommendations from our resident-led commission. So this is a work in progress, and we would love to know what's missing. So we'll share the details in the chat, thank you, Simone, of this right now. So please have a look and tell us what's missing. And then the final thing to say is we would also love if you can sign up for our Climate Connects newsletter. So this is showing what the council's doing, sharing community stories and opportunities to get involved as well. So please do sign up for Climate Connects. And just on a final note, you know, this has been London Climate Action Week, and this is our final event. And this is absolutely not the end of this dialogue. So please, you know, our door as a team is always open. There's our team email there. I think you all have my email as well, so look forward to continuing the conversation with everyone. But thank you very much to all of our speakers today. It's amazing to hear the work that's going on across the borough, so thanks for coming along.